Your thought leadership campaign is running, people are watching, they're listening, they're engaging. But when your CFO asks, is it actually driving revenue? You've got nothing to say. Today, I'm talking to a HubSpot RevOps specialist about the attribution problem that nobody wants to admit they have. We're getting into the dark funnel, influence versus source pipeline, and what good measurement actually looks like in your CRM. This is Pipe Dream. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Pipe Dream and our 1 in 100 series. Today, I'm very excited to be joined by Ross Breckenridge, a gentleman who I met, I'd say about 14, 15 months ago as part of Growth Leaders, which is a kind of CEO agency, kind of peer cohort group that we're part of, run by Anthony Story and Paul Tansey down here on the South Coast. We won't spend much time talking about Growth Leaders, I think, Ross, but what I will say is that I kind of went into it expecting to kind of just be in a room of other business people and for it to be kind of like business conversations. And I've just really appreciated the last year kind of getting to know you on both like a professional and personal level. And I'm really glad that we finally gotten the opportunity to get together and do this podcast because it's been in the books for a while.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
So why don't we start by you telling us just a quick summary of like who you are, what you do, who you serve, and kind of what I guess marketing looks like for Breckenridge.
Yeah, sure. So I run an agency called Breckenridge. We're a HubSpot Platinum partner. We do three things essentially. We help on board onto HubSpot. We integrate systems into HubSpot, and we help clients execute a unified revenue operations strategy. So that means bringing their marketing, sales, and customer success teams under one strategy, using one set of tools to give the business leaders absolute clarity on what's driving revenue in their business. So that's the elevate pitch. So from our business point of view, we're based on the South Coast. We've got clients all over the UK, some in Europe, North America. Everybody's using the HubSpot tech stack, and we've been on a pretty interesting journey. So our business is 43 years old this year. I wasn't there from the beginning. I would have been quite young. But our business started as kind of graphic designers and developed over time to the point where we were kind of full service digital agency. And since 2013, we've been a HubSpot partner. And then in the last few years, we've really focused down on the revenue operations piece. So we don't do kind of go-to-market marketing services anymore. It is fully focused on those three deliverables that I spoke about previously. And in terms of the marketing of our own agency, I guess we've got channels that we utilize in terms of like HubSpot reps. So we work with HubSpot to help onboard, help sell, and help onboard the product. And then we have kind of two other sets of clients. One is clients that are looking for help with HubSpot. So they're already using HubSpot and they might need some tactical help or some consultancy work to help them kind of unlock the power of the system. And then we have our kind of top tier clients where we really show our value, which is where we're working with people over a longer period of time to really connect all their data to support adoption of the system and to ultimately automate and make really watertight their revenue operations. So they're the kind of go-to markets that we have.
Awesome. So I'm excited today to talk to you about kind of HubSpot and I guess more broadly, like attribution. We're here at Pipe Dream to kind of explore how do businesses turn their kind of points of view into pipeline and like through the running of thought leadership programs and integrated marketing campaigns. And like the biggest challenge I think that they face, and certainly I faced when I was in-house, is like, how do you report on any of this? Like, how do you actually measure and demonstrate value to your kind of leadership team that this content is working? What we're seeing is that a lot of B2B companies are running these thought leadership campaigns, but they have no idea if ultimately, they're working. And so I guess to start with, like in your experience, do you think that is a tools problem? Do you think it's a strategy problem? Or do you think that people are just measuring the wrong things?
It's so interesting. And it comes up daily. I think, yes, there's an element of tools to it. So a disparate tech stack makes it really, really difficult. And, we often find one of the reasons for companies kind of adopting a system like HubSpot is that actually they want to get away from that reporting nightmare where they're kind of spending days a month trying to pull reports from different systems. Ultimately, though, where we really start is the consulting piece on the on the customer journey, the customer journey process. And then, when we're looking at content that people are creating, where is that supporting in the customer journey? Is this a lead gen piece? Is it something that can be deployed across the customer journey, maybe as a nurture piece, maybe even during the sales process? It could be kind of decision making, bottom of the funnel type of content as well. So really, it's our first step is to map out that process and understand where that content, the value of that content sits in that process. It might be in multiple places to kind of start off with, right, okay, what are we trying to achieve with this? And then in terms of the actual reporting, our advice for clients is always just be consistent. However you are looking at trying to attribute the effectiveness of your content throughout the customer journey, and this might be, we've just talked about the marketing and sales journey, but renewals, customer experience, content plays a big part in that as well. So don't forget that side of the customer journey. But really, as I say, the attribution piece is really about being consistent. It's difficult to ever say we've got this 100% nailed, right? Content, you've got lots of places that you publish content where maybe the interactions and the data isn't as easily accessible or connected as it could be. But if you are using a system like HubSpot and you have multiple types of attribution models within HubSpot, first touch, last touch, equal attribution, for example, just make sure that over time you are looking at that consistently rather than kind of flipping between different models. That's our biggest kind of takeaway. Connect the data to one place and be consistent on how you're attributing it.
Yeah, and you kind of touched on an interesting point there, which I guess, we could call like the dark funnel, dark social. You've got all this kind of talk around how, as you put out all this content, there's a lot of consuming, listening, engaging, scrolling that happens before anyone ever raises their hand, possibly in places that, aren't like immediately obvious to you as a brand. Is this a conversation that's coming up with clients? Like, how do we actually track what's happening on these borrowed channels? And like, how do you then advise clients to start bringing that into their reporting so that it's not just a guessing game? Like, oh, we saw something happen on LinkedIn where someone was commenting on our post. That's great. Like, it's working.
Yeah, sure. I think you can kind of drive yourself crazy trying to be perfect in this area. There is going to be, I think, some natural hidden or kind of dark interactions that maybe is not gettable. But if you have that central source of data, that central source of truth, one contact record where your marketing channels are connected and you can see interactions, you can see comments, you can kind of move that back. And particularly for something like HubSpot, where interactions and the customer journey can be tracked before they become evident as a contact in the system and then retroactively attributed. So for example, someone clicks on an ad, consumes a bit of content, comes back to your website a few weeks later, fills in a customer question or maybe a self-assessment, for example, that then gets connected into the contact record, and then their journey, their retrospective journey is then attributed. So, sometimes that information is dark up until a certain point in the customer journey, at which point it becomes then a little bit more evident with the technology tracking it back.
I mean, that segues into my next question, which is like this kind of never-ending debate between kind of content-sourced pipeline and content-influenced pipeline. Where do you land on that? Like, and I guess as an extension, like, how do you then start setting that up in HubSpot practically?
Yeah, sure. So I love this because from a marketing background, and our agency was obviously a marketing agency, and we work with a lot of marketers, and we want them to get the credit for what they're producing, right? the campaigns tool in HubSpot is really the place where is our go-to for this. And I think, whenever we're kind of demoing HubSpot or onboarding people, it is the marketing gold piece where we can see, which contacts were created, but also who was influenced by this campaign, and not just a single piece of content, marking up a series of content as part of a campaign and being able to attribute the whole effectiveness of all of those pieces of content and all of that effort together as one campaign. So that is the home really of the marketer and their attribution reporting in HubSpot, the campaigns tool. And so, you can do both. You can report on how that content has helped generate new contacts, but also how it's influenced people throughout their journey. Marry that up with more insights in your database, like where were people in the customer journey at the time that they've consumed this content, and you can start to kind of see the effect of that content, whether that's really top of the funnel research type of information, even if it is, is that then being consumed also by customers, and is that helping on their kind of renewal path as well, and being able to see where it is actually effective. So that's the home really, and being able to mark those things up and track how they are working, not just as a new contact, new lead generation, but also as an influencing piece of content, and where in the journey that happens is gold really. So that is our go-to. That's our place where we start with attribution.
So let's say that a client's coming to you and they're saying, okay, we've been running this thought leadership program. We've been creating this content over the last 6 months. We're starting to see some results for it, but it's either qualitative or it's, correlation and inference, just kind of signals basically. And now what we're trying to do is we're trying to, actually set this up in a way that is going to allow us 6 months from now to like quantify the impact that it's having on our business, to actually show the team that it's working beyond, I guess, vibes. Like what does that look like, step by step? Walk me through how you'd set that up in HubSpot, so you're tracking not just the vanity stuff, but actually the signals that this content is driving commercial outcomes.
Yeah, and this is the key to all of it really. Again, kind of coming back to the beginning of what I said, the cornerstone piece of what we do is that process mapping and understanding what that journey kind of looks like. And then the key to the answer to your question really is the fact that your sales team is also using the same tech stack. You also have the sales team visible, have visibility on that consumption, and the signals that consumption gives to the sales team, and that tracks all the way through into a potential lead, which in HubSpot we call a lead object, like an unqualified opportunity, and then obviously straight into and connected into a deal, which is a qualified opportunity, and then through the pipeline ultimately to revenue. So it is the revenue, it's the connection of the revenue to the content and not the vanity metrics that really is the powerful piece. And that does mean that you need a unified process, and that there is a clear kind of correlation between marketing, handover to sales, and how those campaigns have influenced. And that goes for new business, but also, as I mentioned before, renewals, upsell, cross-sell that content may well be supporting as well. So the key to it is that connection to the sales process and ultimately the revenue numbers. And again, that does come from having those two functions using the same system and being able to mark up those pieces of content in the campaigns tool in HubSpot, and then HubSpot will continue to tap, how that's then gone and generated revenue. And it doesn't need to be within the time frame of a campaign. Once you've connected that and you're tracking it, it might be that somebody who's consumed content and come to an event or been influenced by a campaign, 2 years later ends up purchasing, but it's still a really key part of their journey that you want to track. And as marketers, that credit for all that hard work that we've done is there in black and white on the page. So that's, hopefully that gives a little bit of an idea about the power of it. Our process would be look at the process, connect all of the campaign assets up into one place, and make sure that is tracked all the way through into your pipeline and ultimately your revenue.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I mean, I think the kind of, the feelings that you're invoking in me right now is one of like when I was working in-house, as a marketer, you kind of like feel the pain of bad attribution because like you say, you put in all this work, Ogilvy. I know that 50% of my advertising is working. I'm just not sure like what 50%. Not sure if that was Ogilvy, but it's definitely a quote from some famous advertiser in the past. But you put in all this work, and then when things kind of aren't working at a business level, like revenue's down or leads are drying up, the pressure comes onto marketing. Like what are we doing to generate more leads, right? And I'm guessing that as a business, you probably get approached by like a lot of marketers who are saying, "Hey, we need to fix this kind of visibility, this attribution problem." But what you're saying here is like it's not actually a marketing problem. This is like a business problem. So then you've got the marketing function coming in saying like, "Hey, we need to fix this," but they also need to like bring the rest of the organization along with them. That we all need to get stuck in here. Like we can't operate in silos. We all need to be on the same tech stack. We all need to be talking to each other. Like how if you're speaking to a marketer, right, who's coming to you and saying, "Hey, help us fix this problem," like how do you help them build the business case to get leadership, sales, customer service, everyone onto the same page that this is the process they need to run?
Yeah, sure. And this is the exact conversation we have with probably, I would say, 30 to 50% of the businesses that we work with. And the conversations are always the same, right? We are doing all this great work. We're not getting credit for it. Sales are like, we don't really get anything from marketing, the coloring in department or whatever they like to call it. We're off hardcore prospecting. That's where our work comes from. Whether we're starting, if in this case we're kind of starting that conversation with the marketing team, ultimately it's about shared success and accountability. And those two things really come from, again, winding back to that unified strategy. Actually, marketing generates and supports the whole sales process, but also the customer success process. If you're working in silos, what we it's a kind of favorite phrase of mine is marketing and sales and customer success should be more than the sum of their parts. And if you're working in silos, you are leaving money on the table, you are wasting effort, and you don't know what's working. And ultimately, if you've got a unified strategy and a unified tech stack, marketing can be held accountable. Sales can also be held accountable. Customer success can also be held accountable. And you have clear handover processes. You can have SLAs. We are generating these contacts. You must follow up with them in 24 hours. We have one client in particular that this has worked really, really well for, that because they are able to monitor the speed of which they follow up with their MQLs, they call them MQLs. They have been able to see that if they leave a lead on the table for more than 48 hours, the drop off goes from like 70% of them are able to generate conversations to like 20%. And that you can just see it's in the data in the system. And that holds both sets of people accountable, right? So from a marketer's point of view, yes, the driver might be, we know we're doing good work. We want credit for that good work, but also you can be held accountable, right? And if you're coming to the table and saying, we want to be held accountable, we want to show you that this is actually working and this is the right work, and we've done lots of good foundational work to make sure that the effort we're putting in is in the right place, we want to be held accountable, you're much more likely to get the sales and service teams on board, because you're offering up that accountability essentially and saying, we're prepared to sign up for this. We want to help you be better. And it is really, the success of it is about being more than the sum of your parts, working together. Ultimately, they're not separate. They might be separate departments, but they're not. They've got the same goal, right? And so, as a competitive advantage, if you're in an area in an industry where your competitors, they've got revenue generating teams working in silos, they're leaving things on the table, they're not following things up quickly. If you take the opposite approach, that's your competitive advantage. You're going to mop up what they're leaving on the table, essentially.
Yeah, yeah. The kind of being all on the same team. That really resonates. And it does make me think about, the kind of structure of these teams, which I think is a whole other podcast that maybe we can kind of do later on in this year, right? Like, do you need this all kind of like sitting under one like single chief revenue officer, but like a chief revenue officer that isn't just like a salesperson, that also is kind of responsible for marketing, like someone who actually has that kind of domain expertise across the full stack. But I suppose that person would be a unicorn. But look, as we look at kind of wrapping up this interview, the final question I want to ask you is AI, right? This wouldn't be a marketing podcast if we weren't talking about AI. It's changing how buyers research. They're asking, ChatGPT, they're asking Claude the answers to their questions. So, who should I be working with? How do I solve this problem before they ever Google anything, or, let alone fill out a form on their website? And so, how should that shift the way that businesses are thinking about RevOps and what they should be trying to measure in the next, 1, 2, 3 years? What's your thinking there?
This feels like a constant conversation, right? So we're having it all the time. But there's I would say there's kind of two pieces to that. One is just coming back to the clear, defined, agreed, aligned, unified process. Like, without that, if you go off and start using AI tools without that structure to it, I think there's a danger that you're not going to get the benefit out of those things, because you're not really sure what the purpose of using them is. But just winding back to how people are buying and researching, I was having this conversation with some marketers the other day, and regardless of all of the tech innovations that have happened over the 43 years we've been in business, a truism remains the same, right? You've got to be helpful to the people that you can help and that you want to be helping, right? If you are genuinely of value and you are helping them achieve the thing that you set out your business goal to do, whether they are researching via Claude and ChatGPT, or whether they're using Google still, or whether they're asking a friend or seeking referrals on LinkedIn, it will come back around. If you are the people that can help and that you are providing that value, answering those questions, unlocking that opportunity, solving that challenge, that's what it's all about. And I think, sometimes we can get distracted by shiny new things, but the core of what we're doing as marketers is solving problems, right? And getting that clear message out. And if we continue to do that, then you will be successful in all of those channels as well. So yeah, I think structure and process is beautiful. That's what we love, but also really understanding your audience and being of value, and that's not going to change.
Awesome, Ross. This has been a fantastic conversation on, we covered everything from like the dark funnel, like influence versus source pipeline, what good measurement actually looks like in your CRM. Super actionable. I think a lot that we can take away. Where can people learn more about you, and where can people learn more about Breckenridge?
Yeah, check us out. We're on LinkedIn, Breckenridge Agency. We're on online, breck.agency, or you can contact me directly, Ross at breckenridge.agency. I'm always happy to chat. RevOps, tech, systems, people, transformation projects. Yeah, I'd love to hear from people.
Awesome. Well, we'll drop the links to your profile and the website in the show notes of this episode. But Ross, thanks very much for joining us on Pipedream.
Thanks, Jason.